If you are a teenager, high school student, college student, or the parent of one, and you're finding that even though you're capable of doing better, you're capable of more than this, it's just been a really hard time, and you're finding yourself either struggling to get motivated for school or staying positive or feeling hopeful about things going on in your social world or whatever, you are so not alone. And I have so many conversations with people your age, with parents, hearing the same thing again. And what happens is when you're on the inside of it, it feels very alone with it. But I want to talk to you about things that I'm finding are just very normal right now. So, one of the first things, and this is a really important distinction in terms of the kind of work that I do, so you understand where I'm coming from, is that there are absolutely character traits that just make it a lot easier to live in the world. If you're an outgoing extrovert, you like being around people, it's easy for you to talk to people, you let things roll off your shoulders very easily, school comes easy to you, you're comfortable with competition, all these kind of things make it easier to live in this world. But if you're a person who's on that other column, any one of those traits, by the way, you're an introvert, so you just need more quiet, or you prefer to have a few close friends. So you're constantly feeling like trying to socialize in large environments is stressful for you, right? Or you're a little bit more timid, not as outgoing, or you're more sensitive or more intense, or you feel things stronger, or academics is harder for you. You're more of a seeker, so you're asking like life's deeper questions, or you have kind of outlier interests that are not as many people. Any one of those character traits makes it harder to live in this world. And most of the people I work with have one of those traits, and some of them have multiple of those traits, okay? So this is the thing to really understand about what's gone on in the world in the last 7, 8 months since this whole pandemic thing happened, is that the people have regressed. There's been a lot of backwards movement. There's been a lot of people who are really growing and making steps in their life have just gone backwards, and you see it showing up in many different ways in their life. And so for most teenagers who I'm interacting with, it shows up, first of all, probably the most common thing is just academics, where it was just so much easier to do school when you were in school. There was, compartmentalized 50-minute sections, people writing stuff on the board, people around you. The structure was set up, people checking your assignments, whatever. You couldn't be like on your computer looking at YouTube videos while class is going on, or turning your camera off. And there's a lot of people who are capable of doing really well in school that their grades are not doing well. For the first time in their life, they're getting lousy grades. And it's pretty discouraging, especially if you're like an older high school student where you're in one of those, semesters where you're trying to go to college and the grades matter, okay? Health and fitness is another one where people have been, going to sports practices or going to the gym and that stuff, and all of a sudden it's not happening, and it's gotten really easy to just eat a lousy diet, not be as disciplined with taking care of yourself the way you wanted to, and then that has a feedback to it, right? You start not feeling good, and then you feel lethargic, and then you don't feel like doing the stuff you need to do. So that's one of the things that's common, okay? I've seen a lot of people who were just hitting their groove socially, and then all of a sudden they've lost the opportunity to be out in the world, and they're in their heads again, and they're not feeling confident or sure about what they're doing socially, especially because so many of the rules have changed around how to actually engage and get together with people. Seen a lot of people having like these hissy fits and temper tantrums and just like losing it at a level that they just typically don't do because their stress level has just gotten so high, and it's like their emotional maturity has just regressed. And all of a sudden, instead of feeling like you're, an adult in the world or on the cusp of adulthood, you're feeling like a little kid where little things are bothering you or you're reacting or something. And also just in general, I see a lot of people like losing their flexibility. So it used to be like, there'd be a disappointment or a setback or whatever in life. And while it sucked, and maybe you'd go home if you're like a person who tends to overthink, like a lot of people I work with, you might dwell on it for a while, but you would sort of become flexible, adapt, move forward with it. And now there's just too much time to be sitting and dwelling on things, and it's become harder to be flexible about different ways to go about doing things. So people have regressed, and there's a lot of it going on at all ages. I see this from all sorts of different people in all different stages of life, and this is one of the ways it shows up with students at this point, okay? One of the other things is there is just madness in the world right now, and it is really hard not to be affected by it when it's in the news, when it's on your social media, when it's in the interactions you have with people, when it's like, people in the parking lot of the store or whatever. There's a lot of madness going on out there. Some of it is just the obvious, right? Like political madness, right? Like the divisiveness, the tribalness, the hate spewing, the conspiracy theories. The people who are all righteous and think if you don't think the way they do, that somehow you're stupid and they're woke and you're not, and all this stuff. And it is really hard when you're interacting with that kind of stuff a lot in your life right now. And there's just a lot of it out there. So also a lot of financial stress. And whereas if you're a student or a teenager, you may not notice this one directly, but indirectly you do, especially if your parents are struggling with it, where they're worried about keeping their jobs, they're worried about paying the bills. And it's a palpable thing when you're in this sort of survival mode that financial stress tends to bring about. It brings tension into the home, and it affects people, and it affects just the general vibe in the world around you. It affects sleep, it affects people's reactiveness to each other. And there's a lot of social discord. A lot of the social discord comes from what's happening politically. It also comes from just people, during the pandemic, for example, the mask wearing and, the anti-mask people and the people who are just being really judgmental and stuff to one another. And this kind of thing is affecting people. And you have to understand, if you just feel like, gosh, the world used to feel so much more calm to me, or I was so much more certain. Like my parents seemed calm, they had their thing together, everything was fine, and now they're stressed. And like my friends' parents won't let anybody go out of the house because they're all worried about getting the virus, but my family's more chill about it. And it just like you're used to kind of like feeling like everything's going to be okay, and now there's a sense that I kind of know it is, but I don't really know how and how long it's going to be, or maybe you're worried it won't. And there's a lot of uncertainty. And I'm hearing about this uncertainty, especially in like students who are going off to college, right? Where, they had planned this year to be in school with their friends and go back and see all their friends, or if they're starting college, and all of a sudden not knowing, are we going to be there? Finding out that we're not going to be there for this semester. Maybe we'll be there next semester, or we're there, but then if the numbers spike, they might shut down the campus again. Uncertainty about what's going to happen with like laws and policies and stuff that are going on there. What's going to happen if there's like a new president who comes in, or there isn't a new president that comes in. And what that kind of uncertainty does is you go, I don't really know how to plan. I'm not really sure what to be doing right now. Like I speak to a lot of high school seniors who are trying to apply to colleges, and like, should I be stressing about the SAT? How do I make a choice about a college when I can't even go visit the school? What kind of careers is there even going to be, like an entertainment industry if there's no movie theaters open anymore, and all this kind of stuff. It's uncertainty. And what uncertainty does for many people, because they don't have much of a capacity for it, is it puts them in this thing called survival mode. Okay. Survival mode is when your sympathetic nervous system is really on overload, where what happens is your whole sort of nervous system is oriented around like staying alive, fight, flight. Okay. And when you're spending a lot of your life with your sympathetic nervous system driving your life, your heart rate goes up, your stress level goes up, you're not sleeping as well at night, digestive issues, there's a lot more like binge anything that's going to make you feel good in the moment to provide some kind of relief. And these are all like the opposite of the ideal conditions that you want, so that, in your ideal conditions, you're more relaxed and you're like, okay, I can do this. There's work to be done. I can take care of it. I can manage the responsibilities and stuff of life. But it's really hard when you're spending so much time in survival mode. Okay, it's also always been, as a teenager, hard not to compare yourself to others. But it's especially hard right now. When you go and you're sitting home on a Friday night and you look at your Snapchat story or whatever Instagram picture, you see these 8 or 10 people together because they have a friend group and they're doing stuff. And you can't do it. Those spontaneous moments where you would have been there after practice. Well, there's no practice right now. Or you would have been there and had lunch with people, and you're not because school isn't open, right? So it's hard not to compare when you see like friends of yours who are at schools that are open and yours is not. Or you looks like they're just having more fun than you, because everybody can make it look like they're having fun on social media. And if you're feeling that, it just goes, God, it looks like everybody else is having more fun than me. You're not alone. And it's also true, but very much not true. Okay, there's a lot of people out there who are going, this just sucks. Like, if it wasn't like this, I'd be at the football game. We would have gone out and got food afterwards. There would have been more parties and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely been easier for people who have these established friend groups with people who all agree to play by the same safety rules, to be together, staying in a small group. If you're at a point where you were still developing your friend groups, though, and now you can't get access to those large groups or whatever anymore, it's frustrating and it's hard not to compare yourself to them and feel like you're, at a disadvantage. And sometimes, it's like to fall into like, why me, woe is me kind of thing, or other people have it so much better and be jealous of them. So, look, it's always been true that people compare, but here's why you shouldn't compare, okay? The most important thing you have to understand is your life is still moving forward. You're still developing. You're still learning. You're still growing. You're at that stage right now where, while maybe it's hard and you just never thought you wish you could go back to school as much as you do right now, it's been difficult for you, but it doesn't mean that your life has stagnated, that nothing is happening, okay? It's the kind of thing where oftentimes you look back, now over things that happened to you, let's say when you were in elementary school that seemed dramatic at the time, and you realize like, wow, it really wasn't that big of a deal, or it was a big deal, but it also is part of the reason why today I've learned this, or I'm, doing this stuff now. Same thing. So you're still developing. It's just going slower than you wanted it to and differently than you wanted it to. You got to recognize, for many people, not everyone, I definitely have people who far prefer not having to go to school, but for many people, it is just easier to focus when you're in school, in a classroom, compartmentalize, like this is the time I do this, than to try to focus when you're sitting in your bedroom at home, right? Athletes, generally, especially boys, tend to do better academically when it's a sports season. It's like a thing about school and the discipline and practice and come home at night and do their schoolwork. And all of a sudden, if you don't have practice, you don't have school, it's harder to focus. And that's one of the reasons that school has been harder for you. It's not that you've gotten dumber. It's not the system is any dumber than it always has been. But it's that it's just not the right context to make it easy for you, okay? There's also just generally not enough pleasure in your life. Dopamine is the hormone that gets released in the body when you're experiencing pleasure. And, normally you go through life and you have just enough things that go on during the day, a funny moment that happens, or somebody you have a good conversation with, or some, guy that you're attracted to, or some girl you see, or whatever. It's like just enough to like constantly give you like little bits of excitement, little bits of whatever, that you continue to like have enough in your life. And what happens is, if you have too much of that, too much dopamine, too much like makes you feel good, you become addicted. This is like video games. This is the vape pen that some of you guys are hitting constantly, right? Because you're addicted to it. It just makes you feel good. The opposite, though, is if you don't have enough dopamine, you don't have enough things bringing pleasure into your life that are making you feel good now, is you get depressed. And on the lowest end of that, people become like despondently depressed, okay? So you're not getting enough dopamine and you have to have more of it. How do we go about doing that, okay? You have to limit the amount of regression that's happened in your life, okay? You have to go, you may not be able to go out there and build, this huge social life that you want, but you've got to at least stop yourself from falling into a pit, feeling sorry for yourself, or getting deeply discouraged. You have to be able to keep some kind of perspective that it's all going to be okay, right? So you have to stay disciplined, which means exercise. I know this sounds so damn cliche to say this to you because you're like, oh God, here it comes. You can tell us to exercise and eat healthy and all that stuff. Yes, because it's part of being human. You're a biological being, okay? This stuff matters for you to take care of yourself. So it's being disciplined with getting your studying done, with reading, with learning things, educating yourself. I know some kids who have just like taken their skills with musical instruments to a whole new level because they go, I got all this time on my hands. I'm just going to focus on my guitar. That kind of thing really helps you. And you've got to be able to keep perspective. You have to remember that as much as this whole situation is awful, and there are moments that are really, really bad, really, really difficult to go through, humans have gone through a hell of a lot worse than this. I mean, the Black Plague that swept through Europe killed 1 out of 3 people. Okay, 33% of people died during that. All right, this is something we have science, we have health advances, we have at least the opportunity to have choices around certain things like precautions, like wearing masks, these kinds of things. Like, we're going to get through this and we're going to emerge on the other side of it. You've got to keep perspective that it's harder to do school right now because it's just harder to do learning this way. Our schooling was not designed to be done online, okay? Harder to have a social life because not many people are socializing as freely as they were before, but we're going to get through this stuff, and it's so critical that you keep your sense of humor. I've often said that my clients who know me well know this. I always say this, that I literally believe I would go nuts if I didn't have a sense of humor. And the amount of times in a day that I like laugh at the absurdity of stuff that's going on out there, and it just can't reinforce for you enough. Like, make sure that if the way you're going to keep a sense of humor is to make sure you watch some funny show, or have a few friends that you can have laughs with or whatever, like, make sure you keep some perspective and sense of humor going through this. And so critical is make sure you engage with people who are positive and healthy. It's just not useful to get together with people who want to whine and complain about how bad the world is right now. Staying together with people who are more positive, people who are willing to get up and go out and do stuff, and want to watch the game with you or whatever. I mean, it's like the whole dopamine thing. It's like, I've talked to a lot of boys who, like, their dopamine hit was watching sports, and all of a sudden there was like 4 months where there was no sports, and they're like, don't know what to do with themselves because they're searching that. Positive people can be dopamine for you. It just brings out the best in you to be around positive people. Remember, this too shall pass, and you have to keep this very much in perspective, okay? I hate when people say things to high school and college students like, oh, these are the best years of your life. It's not the best years of your life. Hopefully it'll be the best years of your life so far, but you don't want high school to be the best years of your life or college to be the best years of your life. The reason you don't want it to is because what happens then is when it's over, it's all downhill from there. I hate that advice. Understand, you've got to keep going. The best is yet to come. The best friends you're going to make in your life, you probably haven't met yet. The person one day that you may marry and build a family with, they're out there and you haven't met them yet. The careers that you're going to have, that you're going to go down and have this great success in, the adventures, the experiences, the realizations, the things you're going to create, they're all out in your future. And you're going to get to them. Even if it feels like it's going slower than it was, it's all going to work out. You got to keep going. The best is yet to come. All right, well, I hope this video was helpful to just give you some sense of normalcy around what you're going through and the key things I think you have to focus on to just take care of yourself, to ensure that the worst you slip is that you get to a point where you're kind of meh and not where you're at a point where you're like really down. And ideally, where the best you get to is like, this is hard, and so what I did was, and then you have a really cool answer that comes after that. Because that's what makes your life so fascinating, is when you have a great answer to that question. All right, hope this was helpful.